Oh, if I could tell your story, right? Man, I'd made billions of dollars in this business.
Isn't that amazing?
What?
Cause we meet so many people and they're like, "Oh, I sold my business for 500 million. Oh, I did this for $1 billion," and you're like, "Wait, oh my God." There
Incredible.
are lessons everywhere.
Incredible. Yeah, you can be a speaker.
Yeah.
As long as you have learned some lessons from what your life taught you and then learn how to tell it.
When you get a clear message, you can then take that clear message and convert that to millions.
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
really
that's
what it's
right.
about.
That's right. Do you know how many small business leaders would love to hear your story and extract the content from you or how you built this multi-million dollar brand, billion-dollar brand?
All right, Walter. I just hung up the telephone with one of the former NFL players that I work with in helping them build their speaking business. And so I thought, you know what, rather than me answering Billy's questions in a normal, like, Zoom way, I was like, let me pull in my expert. Let me pull in my first speaker client, really. I mean,
Yeah.
you're my first $1 million speaker I helped create and build. And I'm excited because in this next season is about me building a whole lot more of $1 million speakers. But we were talking about him launching and really starting his business. And his question was simple. He's like, okay, I want to really get this thing going. What do I need to do? And I mentioned to him about finding his voice, finding his message, having a signature story. What would you say for all the people listening that they want to build a speaking platform, business, getting paid to speak? What would you say to them in this first phase of getting their message out there?
Well, the first thing I want to say, that's pretty cool that, you've been able to branch out your gift and now it's bigger than just, booking me. And these athletes are smart. They realize my secret weapon. And I tried to keep you under the wraps as long as I could, but you do a great job with that. But, my message for an athlete is one, you have to understand what your story taught you. All of our stories are different. My story taught me something different than someone else's story. In fact, one of the athletes that we're working with now was picked number 13th in the draft. So his story's different. I was an underdog guy, but he was that dude from day one, right? And so I was teaching him just on our initial orientation, like, look, your story's different than mine, but what did your story teach you? Right? And once you understood what your story taught you, now you frame your whole message around what your life has taught you because you can share that with an audience. I do very well with underdogs. I do very well with people who have a dream, might have some doubters, might have some challenges, and they just had to persevere. Some athletes are just gifted from day one. I mean, were just anointed from day one to be a pro and should be a Hall of Famer from day one. And we saw that in high school. And if you study sports, it's obvious sometimes. I couldn't even imagine watching Shaquille O'Neal when he was 12 or LeBron when he was 14. I remember seeing a kid in Minneapolis play a high school game, and I told you, that's an NBA ball player. And he was a sophomore in high school. So there's different levels of gifts in sports, but all of our stories are different. So my number one message for an athlete, not just athletes, because we work with executives
Yeah, I was
too.
gonna say, I was thinking like, okay, it really brought to everyone.
Yeah, we work with a lot of professionals.
Yeah.
We have executives, athletes. We have people who, ordinary people walking off the street, but have an incredible story to share. And sometimes those people are more powerful because they're more relatable.
Oh,
Because you
absolutely.
get someone, well, I'm not 6'9", I didn't play in the NBA, so can I speak? Yeah, you can be a speaker.
Yeah.
As long as you have learned some lessons from what your life taught you, and then learn how to tell it. So there's two parts to that. You have to learn the lesson that your life taught you, but then you have to learn how to tell it. And we have tons of exercises to help our clients get their story out of them. Because sometimes they'll say to you, like, well, I haven't done much. I only overcame cancer. Or I haven't done much, I just launched my own company and made 10 million and
Isn't that amazing?
what?
Cause we meet so many people and they're like, "Oh, I sold my business for 500 million. Oh, I did this for $1 billion," and you're like, "Wait, oh my God!" There
Incredible.
are lessons everywhere.
Incredible. In fact, one of our neighbors across the street, I was joking with him, and he says, Walter, you're never home. You're always on the road. And jokingly, I said, well, if I had your plane, I wouldn't be here. I'd be here more often. He said, yeah, good point. I was like, I was cracking a joke.
Right.
Yeah, he had two planes,
Right.
right? And he dropped out of high school and launched a technology company and sold it for $500 million. So his story, in my mind, is just as powerful as the Michael Jordan story. People want to talk about when Michael Jordan got caught off his high school team. Great story. But this guy across the street, dropped out of high school and now owns two private, of his own planes, and he's a pilot. So
Yeah.
the moral of the story, if you have an incredible story and if you learn how to tell it, that's all we need to be able to work with you to become a professional speaker.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So, check number one, a powerful message. I think it starts with the message.
Yep.
Your message is everything because your message really is that tool to get you to the masses.
Right.
So, you got to have a message.
Right.
If you don't have a crystal clear message, it's going to be very hard to get you booked to speak.
No one can stop you but you.
Remember that?
That's
That was
how-
our first message. And
That's right.
did we not rock No One Can Stop You
Man,
But You?
that laid the foundation. That
It really
set the
did.
tone. And it was genuine. It was authentic. It was my story. Like, no one can stop you but you. And in reality, how we came up with that, it was just a part of the story. It was a natural title.
Yeah.
Because in many cases, I was in my own way. And once I kind of got out of my own way, things began to fall into place. And that's when I realized myself, like, you know what? No one can stop me but me. And so as I began to tell my story, I inverted it to the audience because you don't want to be selfish as a presenter. And so I learned through my own life story that no one can stop me but me. And we just inverted it and said, hey, no one can stop you but you. And it turned into really a Hall of Fame career.
Yeah.
And it was just a message that was in my heart based on what my life taught me.
And you know what? Back to No One Can Stop You But You. I mean, that message got awards. We got awards with that message from different associations, different state associations, different recognitions.
Right.
I mean, you stop and really think about when I think about that title today, and it was pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And that's the reality for everyone. Like, no one can stop you but you. We, as
And
you
that-
said,
that-
we get our own way.
Here's the beautiful thing. It led us to our first book. We sold, 60,000 copies, like out the trunk.
Of all, and that book was called what?
All butts stink.
And so let's think
How
about
to
this.
live your best life and eliminate excuses.
So let's think about this. When you get a clear message, you can then take that clear message and convert that to millions.
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
really
that's
what
right,
it's about.
that's right,
You get a clear message. You can take that clear message, convert it to different products, different trainings, different courses, different processes, which will lead you to millions, honestly. And that's what this industry called speaking. I call it the business of motivation. It's an industry all by itself. All right, so take me through like a process to build that first message. Take us through
Well,
the process.
Great. We have exercises that we teach, but basically, in the beginning, we sit down with that speaker and just have them share their life story and really begin to extract out of their life story what we need to share on that stage that's really teachable. Because some of your life story is just funny and just cool to talk about, but other parts of it is where the true content is. And a lot of speakers don't understand they're sitting on content, and we have to bring it out. I was just with the CEO of a franchise. This guy is a franchise legend. I mean, he was the chair of the International Franchise Association's board. And he was like, Walter, I'm thinking about speaking, and people want me to speak, and they want me to write books, but I don't think I have a message. I'm like, dude, you're leading a multi-billion-dollar franchise. Of course you got a message. I said, here's the problem. You're just being you. You're just being you, and all these things you do are becoming instinctive, but people who don't have your instincts can't lead a multi-billion-dollar company. So we have to take what's on the inside of you and get it on paper. And he was like, wow, that's a good point. I said, if you thought about a ghostwriter, if you thought, I just gave him ideas, and all of a sudden he began to realize there is something special about me. The guy is a CEO, a franchising legend. And he actually didn't think he was that special and that he had a message. I was like, dude, do you know how many small business leaders or small CEOs of emerging franchises would love to hear your story and extract the content from you or how you built this multi-million-dollar brand, billion-dollar brand? And he actually didn't understand that he was sitting on content. And that's common. And so what we do with our new speakers, we sit them down and have them tell their story, but then we have them extract the lessons that they learned, that their life taught them, and then we teach them how to build it into an amazing keynote. And then it's about them learning how to tell the story and a better job. Because I've seen some people, Antoinette, their story's better than mine, but they don't know how to tell the story. And I'm
Right.
like, dude, if I could tell your story, because your story's better than mine. We know athletes that came through the ringer and they ended up being the number one pick in the draft who are friends. And I'm like, dude, you had the perfect ending. You were the number one pick in the draft. Oh, if I could tell your story, right? Man, I've made billions of dollars in this business. But it's all about you knowing what your story is, what you learn from it, and then crafting the perfect message to add value to other people.
You know, as you're saying that, that's another great point. Because I think about with the storytelling, and you just said something like, because all stories really shouldn't be on the stage, to be honest. And I think when we start pulling in stories, or you hear speakers bringing in stories that have absolutely nothing to do with the messaging, I mean, what do you call that and consider that, to be honest?
Well, a lot of times speakers aren't necessarily professional, right? There's a professional speaker, and then there's a professional who speaks. A professional who speaks, they're going to do random things, right? Because they're not really seasoned. They don't have a command of the message. They don't have a command of the stage. A true professional speaker has a command of their stage. They have a command of their story. They have a command of their message. They know exactly what their audience needs. They consider time of day. They consider the needs of the organization. They consider the demographics of the organization. We teach so many details in our coaching program. I tell my people, man, you better go check the lights. They look at me like, what? I remember I went to an event, one of our young speakers, and I walked in the ballroom and I was like, oh no, the ballroom was dark. I mean, in your sound check, don't you ever speak in a dark ballroom. When his message was over, I could tell he didn't feel good about it, and he was beating himself up. And I said, come here, young fella. Man, don't you ever speak in a dark ballroom. You were very good, but you were competing against darkness. So philosophically, or I don't know the word, the body wants to go to sleep when the ballroom's dark. And he's in the dark ballroom. I was like, dude, you're fighting against yourself. Don't you ever speak in a dark ballroom, right? And he got encouraged because I was like, you were good. But the people in the ballroom were lethargic because the ballroom was dark. That's a detail that 23 years of experience has taught me. And so those are kind of lessons that a young speaker or a professional who speaks doesn't understand. But a professional speaker, you better understand that or you're going to have a hard time being elite in our industry.
Okay, and so back to just really locking in on the mechanics. And I want to make it about the mechanics. I think because what you're talking about, I think that's like an advance. We'll get to that in our journey here. But I want to talk about the mechanics because last week, honestly, we heard Mike Rowe. I mean, what were some things you saw him do? And I went and looked at what his fees are. Oh, he's like like kind of what's that mastery? Because we're talking, you always talk about mastery, and I noticed every story he told, there was nothing that did not relate to his purpose.
Yeah, he was very talented. He was very organized in his thought. And the audience just felt like they were having a conversation with him. But he was very strategic in how he used his stories, how he built his stories, the detail of his stories. So he talked about being in the sewer, and he was so vivid with his storytelling. You were in the sewer with him.
Absolutely.
I mean, you could visualize exactly where he was, and he framed this all up with his mouth. The beauty of a professional speaker, it's like going to a movie, but you don't have the luxury of the screen. Right? And so think about that. When you go to a
Wow.
movie, you can actually visually see what's going on. And when the movie's still bad, I'm like, dude, you guys are awful because we have the luxury of visualization on the movie screen. So when a speaker's speaking, they paint the picture with their mouth. And a great storyteller can paint the picture with their mouth so vividly, you're in the room with them. We were in the sewer with Mike. Mike Krzyzewski spoke as well. We were in the locker room with USA Basketball, with Michael Jordan and Kobe. And so he was able to paint the picture with Grant Hill and all the players he coached. But a mediocre speaker, they don't paint the picture well. And it's all framed up with your mouth. So to answer your question, the $1 million secret of being a fantastic speaker is that you have to become an amazing storyteller. That's the $1 million secret. And those are things that we teach. Those are techniques you got to learn. And the better job you do telling the story, the better the audience is going to engage and the more memorable you're going to get. The biggest compliment I received was someone says, Walter, I heard you 15 years ago, and I never forget you said this. Or you never forget you said that. Sometimes you hear a speaker and you forget everything they said before you can get back to your hotel room.
Right.
Why? Because they didn't tell stories. They just gave you content without stories. And so there's a million mistakes that speakers make. But professional speakers who are taught and trained properly really maximize the storytelling gift. And Mike Rowe was one of the best I've seen.
I mean, just as you say that, that really like such a major epiphany for me. And I guess it was no wonder he came out of journalism. And I think about even within his age range, and I think even, and I would say this for our business, like, wow, the mastery of storytelling. It reminds me back before televisions, what were people doing? Listening to stories on the
That's
radio.
right. That's right.
And that's kind of what I felt like. As you said that in that moment, I'm like, that's what he did. He actually was, if he was a journalist on a storytelling on the radio, he perfected that. And it just created an amazing moment. And I think it's safe to say the better your storytelling, the better your fees.
Well, here, let me give you another little secret. Who are the top comedians? If you really take a look at the top comedians, they're storytellers as well. If you sit down with Kevin Hart or Dave Chappelle, they're telling stories, and they make their stories funny. So if you're going to be a public presenter, there's no escaping being a fantastic storyteller. Now, obviously, I use a lot of humor in my keynote, and it's all wrapped in the story. So storytelling probably is the worst kept secret in speaking, but a lot of times people go up to that podium, they go up to the platform, and they don't even understand how powerful stories are. So those are things you have to learn. Those are things you have to develop, and there's nothing more powerful than you developing your own story, because it's like a fingerprint.
Yeah.
No one else has that story. And we've coached all kind of levels of athletes who could be great speakers. You know, we have people in our program that never played pro ball, but they're great speakers. They played college ball. It doesn't matter. Did you tell your story, right? And you didn't have to play ball, right?
Not
Your
at all.
life is going to teach you. And if you could take your own individual story and relate it to that audience and learn how to tell it, it's like a great movie, but you paint the picture with your mouth.
All right. It's about the story. And so I think that's step number one. You got to extract that signature story, create your signature story. Because that's honestly what Les Brown's been doing a signature story. Heck, he's probably in his 80s now.
You know, Les Brown is so good at his stories that other people can tell his stories. I mean, that's when you know you're a great storyteller, when people want to tell your stories. And I'm pretty sure if you hear Les Brown speak, and if he didn't tell some of his stories, people get upset. If he didn't tell a radio station story, if he don't tell a story about him and his brother being born to a single mom on a linoleum floor, if he don't tell a story about how he was labeled as educatable,
See, you know his story.
yeah, I mean, Les Brown is an icon. He's a power broker, man. He's a speaker that laid the foundation, especially for African American speakers. I mean, without no Les Brown, there's no Walter Bond, right? And so my biggest moment in my story is he called me one day and left me a message and just said he was proud of me. And I was like, man, I'm never going to delete that message. You know, when an icon like Les Brown, who's a fantastic storyteller, who's been telling his stories for decades and decades and is still relevant, really teaches us all, you know, the power of storytelling. And think about your favorite movie. You know, you can watch your favorite movie again. Remember Space Jam? Our
Oh,
kids
our
must
kids
have
can
watched
watch
Space
that.
Jam at least 50 times, if not more, at least 50 times. What's your favorite movie?
I just
Beaches?
started thinking about beaches. As soon as you said that, I was like, you're right. Because when I think about beaches, I know the story. And I feel like me and Bette Midler, I mean, she was the actress, but I'm like, she's my friend, which is
I'm gonna
hilarious.
play some dating game right now. What's our favorite movie together?
I'm going to go with that one.
You got to know this.
Now I'm like,
We're on a newlywed, or is it a dating game? Which one is it? Newlywed, dating
the
game?
notebook. I'm going
No,
with the
that's not
notebook.
our favorite movie. Our together, our favorite movie.
Why not the
I
notebook?
cannot believe you did not get this. Our favorite movie together is Love and Basketball. Are you kidding me? Together, that's
Okay.
our favorite
Is
movie.
it?
Together that
Okay.
we both enjoy. Notebook
The
and
notebook.
it's like,
That was the most emotional I've ever seen you. The Notebook? Are you kidding me? How you gonna not put the Notebook up in
how
there?
many times have we watched Love and Basketball?
I okay, I agree. I love loving basketball. I can almost just rewind to the one basketball scene, and it's like the one scene. It's one scene. Actually, it's
Honey,
one
that
scene.
is our favorite
Okay,
movie
so now I know.
together.
Sorry, I failed the test. I didn't win. Dog it. Give me another chance.
I remember Notebook. I remember I had a moment, and I knew why I had that moment.
Yeah.
But that's another episode.
All right, so just I think to wrap this up, I think the number one message we gotta just if you're serious about trying to build a speaking business, you gotta one develop the stories and you gotta create your signature story. What are you known for? And I think that's why even like now when you go places, we have people that's there looking at you like, well, we liked your old stuff. That's what they
Right,
say now.
right,
And they're
right.
like, we liked your old stuff better.
Yeah.
And I think it's no different than, and I like in this industry to really like the entertainment and music. Yeah, the worst thing you could do is be a one hit wonder. Because honestly, if you're
Right.
a one hit wonder in this
You're not
industry,
gonna last.
you're not going to last.
No.
So you got to make sure you're always changing it up. Have your signature stories because within a 60-minute time frame, well, how many stories are there really within a 60-minute time you have on stage?
Well, we call them hot dogs. I don't want
Yeah.
to get too technical, but that's what we call them. We call them serving up hot dogs. And to your point, you want to be able to put out great albums. And the greatest musicians, you might have your favorite album, but all their albums are good,
Yeah.
right? If you're going to have staying power. And so you're right. We have people who say, Walter, man, that story you told about, you know, um, with your wife
Oh,
and
the banana.
the
You never
banana
say
and
that.
Cheerio
And
story.
people love the banana
Oh my
story.
God.
I mean, you think about it, we substitute great stories for other stuff that we're like, are we getting the same reaction?
I've
It's all
had
about the
no.
reaction.
We've been doing this 23 years, and so
I'm like, go back to some oldies and
we
goodies.
have put out a bunch of albums, and I'm telling you, I had people come to me and mention a story I forgot about. I'm like, I did you tell
The raisin
like
story.
French fries digging a little deeper. You got to
People
dig
look,
a little
and
deeper.
that honestly, that's what back when we started this business going to high schools and colleges, and just like we were kicking it, just like starting high school, just
I've had
going out.
grown men come up to me and say, "Man, you're the
And they
French
knew the
fry
first,
guy.
they,
You're the French fry guy. You
yes.
spoke about high school." I'm like, "Dude, you're a grown with beard and gray hair." Like, yeah, I'll never forget. You came to my high school and you were the French fry guy. You told the French fry story. So the moral of the story, I mean, you have to come up with a bunch of stories. You got to produce a bunch of albums if you're going to have a long career as a speaker. And it's okay for someone to have their favorite album. It's okay for someone to have their favorite story, but you got to keep producing content. You got to keep producing stories, and that's how you're going to have a long career. And we're only 56, and we're going to be doing
Are
this
you telling my
business.
age? Everybody think I'm
Well,
30.
I'm 56. She little. I'm the cougar. Can I be a cougar anyway? But moral of the story, you got to keep producing content.
Yeah.
You got to keep producing story, and my hope is that people love the old stories with the messages. People love the new stories with the messages, and when it's all said and done, we should be able to produce a lot of content that's going to help people get to their pinnacle, and that's
All
the moral
right.
of the story.
Okay, so Billy, this was for you and all those other ones that are listening too. But Billy, make sure step number one, get that signature story together, get out there, and then we're gonna market that puppy to the world. And just let's go change lives. I think at the end of the day, if you want to have impact, focus on serving and changing people's lives. If you make that a priority, you will never be out of style. All right?
Yeah, and that my final thought is like all of our lives have taught us something, and being a speaker is just sharing what your life has taught you.
Mm.
And sharing it in such a way that the people listening is going to learn from your story and go and have results in their own lives. And that's easy to do if you really
Yeah.
think about it.
All right. Thank you for joining us. If you like this type of content, make sure you like, click, subscribe, share, and maybe join us. We
And
love to
comment.
have you be a part of us.
What's
All right.
click? What's click?
Click on the link below. Click and hit subscribe. Click, clink, clinkily, clink, clink.
Yeah, like,
All right.
subscribe, share, and comment. It's actually four, right?
For a comment,
Yeah, okay.
yes. All right.
Give us a little fire symbol
Yeah. We
if
like
you thought it was
fires.
fire.
All right. Okay. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you,
Next
Walter,
episode,
for
absolutely.
giving me some great content to go back and share.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
You're welcome.
We'll keep talking.
I'll let you, boy.